With Red Dead Redemption 2 less than a month away now, it would be fair to say that I'm quite excited. It's been my most anticipated release ever since it was announced in 2016, and the more I see of it, the more impatient I become. It's like being a 15-year-old all over again. I vividly remember waiting for my pre-ordered copy of Red Dead Redemption to arrive. I was still in high school, gearing up for a work experience placement in Cardiff Museum, yet all I could think about was getting home and playing Rockstar Games' latest open-world masterpiece. I watched every piece of media on the game that I could. I read each and every article about the game that I could. I watched 3:10 to Yuma and Unforgiven more times than I can count. I even ordered a used copy of Activision's Gun to tide me over for the few more days I would have to wait. Ultimately, Red Dead Redemption arrived a day early and on the same day that Gun arrived, so the latter ended up gathering dust while I religiously played Red Dead over the coming weeks. I can't help feeling nostalgic over the first game, and I always lament the fact that I'm not able to play it on my PC or my PlayStation 4. Yes, I know PS Now is a thing, but you try using that horrendous waste of time. It's gotten as bad as me considering picking up an old Xbox or PS3 just to play through Red Dead one last time. It's been 8 years since release. In the meantime, Rockstar released LA Noire, Max Payne 3, and of course Grand Theft Auto 5. The latter of which has gone on to become one of the most financially successful games of all time, due in part to its HD re-release and the exorbitantly profitable GTA Online. Whilst I enjoyed all three of these games, I never felt they quite reached the heights of Red Dead Redemption, and that's not to say they were bad games. GTA 5 was a technical marvel that capped off the 7th generation of consoles nicely, and then impressed me yet again with its enhanced PS4 and PC re-releases. Max Payne 3 was a great game that took Remedy's cult series and breathed new life into it with Rockstar's trademark flair, and LA Noire was, well, it was good. I don't tend to think that highly of it in hindsight, but to be fair to Rockstar, they did serve as publishers in this instance, with development being undertaken by Australian-based studio Team Bondi. The point is that all three games were commercially well received. My personal gripes with each aside, that aren't really worth going into in this video, though I will perhaps cover some of my biggest problems with GTA 5 in a future video. I'm not sure why these three games didn't click with me as much as Red Dead Redemption did. Maybe it's because I'm older. I'm 23 now, I have my own home, a girlfriend, 2 dogs, a cat, and a whole load more responsibilities than I did when I was 15. As such, I find myself not getting as emotionally invested in games as I used to. Take Marvel's Spider-Man for example. I got it on release, I finished it over the weekend, and then obtained 100% over the coming week. Yet I wouldn't really say it's a game I'd play over and over again, or even something I'd consider one of my favourites. That's not to say it's bad, it's in fact a very good game, one of the best games available on PlayStation 4 in fact. It just didn't stay with me after I turned it off, nothing particularly stood out to me, it was missing something. There are exceptions to the rule, of course. I can think of at least 2 off the top of my head. The Witcher 3 and Horizon Zero Dawn were both superb games that I hold very dear to my heart, earning high places on my hypothetical list of favourite games. Red Dead Redemption remains my favourite game, however, and perhaps the only game that will knock that off the pedestal will be its sequel. Either way, I'm eager to find out on October 26th. For now though, I'd like to gush over Red Dead Redemption a little bit and hopefully convey why I feel it's the best thing Rockstar has ever put out. I want to make it clear that I won't be detailing the expansion pack Undead Nightmare in this video, but if you want to know my quick thoughts on that, I would say that it's a decent enough distraction that doesn't really fit in with the overall themes of the base game, but it's still quite a lot of fun regardless. Also, just a brief warning before we get into the bulk of this video, there will be story spoilers for Red Dead Redemption and GTA 5 ahead, so if you're one of the maybe 2 people left in the world that hasn't played them yet, you've been warned. I would urge you to play both in order to get a better understanding of my ramblings, though a small idea of both games' themes and mechanics should be enough for you to hopefully enjoy this. 2010 was a big year for console gaming. We got Halo Reach, Mass Effect 2, and of course Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar had a big pedigree with massive franchises such as the aforementioned Grand Theft Auto and Max Payne, but their original Red Dead Revolver game was actually more or less completed by the time Rockstar had acquired the rights from Capcom, and whilst Revolver was still a great game, you could clearly see Rockstar's aim with Red Dead Redemption was to allow for a more open-ended experience, which is really what they as developers excel at. There is a really good series that covers the history on Red Dead Revolver by Gamers, spelled with a V. I will link that below. tighter and more linear experiences from Rockstar, such as Max Payne 3, are still great, but I think many people would agree that fucking around on GTA was what made these games special to many people. And that's not to say the stories were bad or anything, though admittedly I did think GTA 5's story was sort of shit. The real bread and butter of these games, if you will, are the sandbox mechanics. Sandboxes that are filled with enjoyable things to do, something that developers like Ubisoft fail to understand with their impressive but ultimately joyless sandbox environments of Assassin's Creed, Ghost Recon, and Far Cry. It's all personal taste in that regard, I guess. I know plenty of people, including my girlfriend, really enjoy the collectathons in, say, Far Cry 5, and that's great, but I do feel like meaningful side activities and ways to interact with the environment are what make games stick in the mind. I'll always fondly remember getting the Platinum Trophy in Horizon Zero Dawn, as I enjoyed every minute of the 40 or so hours that took me, whereas Far Cry 5, for as fun as that game was, has almost completely slipped my mind a mere 6 months after release. The visuals of this game on the Xbox 360 are superb, even more so when upscaled on the Xbox One. Sadly, the PS Now version is an awful way to play the admittedly inferior PS3 version, which is a shame. The environment itself is still one of the most realised and believable game worlds available. It can be quite a sight when you're riding through the American Old West Dust Bowls or the Mexican deserts, and this is even more impressive considering that this was Rockstar's first real attempt at a rural open world setting, and perhaps due to the success of Red Dead's game world, this more rural-like landscape has made its way into Grand Theft Auto 5, with the Blaine County region of San Andreas featuring both heavily wooded and desert environments. The level of detail in Rockstar games is always outstanding, and that goes without saying, but achieving this in a less urbanized setting where little details are less likely to be noticed is even more commendable, and it's not just these vast stretches of nothingness that are impressive. Whether it's walking through the dusty town of Armadillo filled with outlaws and remnants of a dying Old West, or the increasingly modernizing town of Blackwater with its almost alien-like appearance of cars and pavemented roads, each location feels like it has a backstory and a character to it and its residents, and few games 8 years later have managed to capture this feeling. GTA 5 itself struggled to match the stark differences between areas of the map. I always loved making my way from Marston's Ranch to Armadillo, taking in the sights as I went. It truly felt like I was there. That kind of immersion is so rare for me, and it's something that I hope desperately that Red Dead Redemption 2 manages to recapture. From what I've seen, Rockstar have opted to use real-life towns this time around, rather than their fictionalized version of the Old West in the first game, something that I think will only enhance that level of immersion. The gameplay and story remains strong too, in fact. By this point, Rockstar, after finally embracing the magic of checkpoints after some frustrating moments in GTA 4, nailed the pacing of their mission structure. Early missions easing you into the game mechanics of shooting and riding with a real authenticity as to why your character would be doing these things. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the game's story, but in case you aren't, I'll provide a very brief summary. John Marston is ordered out to find and kill or capture the members of his old gang, starting with the one Bill Williamson. And yes, I have just realised that this guy's name is William Williamson. I can see why he went by the former. It's the same reason I cringe every time someone calls me James instead of Jamie. Seriously, why when my parents have called me James Jones, it's obviously Jamie, not James. Anyway, after tracking Bill Bilson to a fort near the town John arrives in, he is promptly shot in the gut and left for dead. After waking up with a fresh scar at a nearby ranch, he spends the first 5 to 6 hours of this game helping out the ranch hands and the nearby townsfolk of Armadillo. These early hours could have easily been dull and tutorial heavy. Think the first few hours of Assassin's Creed 3 is a very good example. But in this case it all feels natural and believable. John feels like a genuine part of the environment around him and not just an avatar for the player to experience the world. And this carries through the entire game as you hop from either side of the law, helping sheriffs and outlaws alike, to once you arrive in the Nuevo Parisian region of the Mexican border, either side of the war, helping both the brutal dictator of the region as well as the resistance intent on overthrowing him. John Marston is not a good man. He's killed and robbed throughout his life, but he never shies away from this. He realises that he's been evil in the past, but he wants to improve. He wants to look after his family and live a quiet life. He's a dying figment of the Old West in many ways, and with the world modernising around him, John is very much a man that cannot live in this new world. You can almost see his death at the hands of the government coming in many ways. He's the fall guy for them. I don't normally like dramatic irony in games, as I feel it creates a disconnect between the player and the character, but in this instance, I think on some level, John knows his imagined quiet life of being a rancher is something that he won't be able to maintain. Travelling throughout the world, you really do get the impression that John wants this over as quickly as possible. He wants to get home and see his family, something that becomes more and more prominent once you track down and ultimately kill your former gang leader and mentor, Dutch van der Linde. You could almost see the story as John killing his old life, I guess. I mean, it's a very artsy way of looking at it, and I'd hate to sound like a pretentious prick, more so than I already have anyway. In any case, Dutch's final words to John, that the law will find another monster to target and that our time has passed, seems to be very much foreshadowing the game's ending. Dutch kills himself by falling off a cliff rather than being taken into custody, refusing to change his nature to fight, as he calls it. There's an intentional slow in the pace during the latter stages of the game that works perfectly to lull you into a false sense of security that maybe John will get his happy ending, before quickly turning the tables in Rockstar's typically cynical fashion and becoming one of the most memorable ending segments of any game I've played. The epilogue, taking place 3 years later, puts you in the shoes of John's son Jack, and tasks you with finding the culprit behind your father's murder, a government suit named Edgar Ross, who has retired to a quiet life on the Mexican border. It is a truly memorable segment when you gun down Ross, and provides a small amount of justice for John, albeit at the expense of Jack becoming everything his father did not want him to be, a murderer just like him. John's impressive characterization was something that I felt Rockstar lost when they chose to have 3 playable characters in GTA 5. I never found Michael, Trevor or Franklin particularly compelling. In fact, I found them pretty repulsive. John had redeemable qualities. Even Nico from GTA 4 was a character that you could at least empathize with. The characters in GTA 5 are quite simply bad, unlikable people. I was very relieved to hear that you play as just one character in Red Dead Redemption 2, as I really do feel that Rockstar excel when they focus on a single protagonist. That's not to say Red Dead Redemption didn't have an interesting supporting cast. I fondly remember Irish, the drunken outlaw that's as incompetent as he is potty-mouthed, Seth, the stir-crazy grave robber who was betrayed by his partner and seeks petty revenge, or even Reyes, the charismatic leader of the Mexican rebellion who ultimately turns out to be just as bad as the tyrant he overthrows. Each character is compelling in their own ways, much more so than, say, Lamar or Jimmy in GTA 5, who feel more like caricatures, though this probably fits more in tone with that game's tongue-in-cheek approach to modern America. Even so, the strong characterization of the cast of Red Dead Redemption is something that I hope the second game carries forward, and the exemption of multiple characters seems to support this. Story aside, Red Dead Redemption is absolutely stuffed with side missions and activities. Ubisoft ruined the whole enemy outpost shtick recently, but clearing out the 7 gang hideouts scattered across the game world was great fun, utilising unique situations in order to make one feel different from another. An example of quality over quantity. If you compare that to the carbon copy outposts of, say, Far Cry, it really is a stark contrast. I realise it seems like I'm shitting on Ubisoft at every opportunity, and I don't mean to. I just think that they've tried to emulate the sandboxes of Rockstar's games without truly understanding what made them compelling, something they're slowly getting better at with things like Assassin's Creed Origins, for example. I'm not sure whether gang hideouts will make an appearance in Red Dead Redemption 2 due to this aforementioned stigma, but I would be surprised if something similar in some way is not included. Completing one of the 19 Strangers tasks, another addition carried forward to Grand Theft Auto 5, were a real delight, with each one offering something different. I always really enjoyed the mysterious I Know You task. It's one that I think is relatively understated and incorporates some pseudo-supernatural elements without seeming too out of place. I know there are countless theories on who the strange man is, whether he's God or the devil or what have you. It really is an interesting thing to look into, even if the missions themselves aren't the best the game has to offer. Of course, in keeping with Rockstar's prior efforts, there are quite a few activities that you can take part in, such as blackjack, poker, horseshoes, racing, etc. I must admit that I didn't really bother with these all that much, as I'm crap at card games and racing games alike, so they didn't really appeal to me. Regardless, there really is no shortage of things to do. I'm gonna have to shit on Ubisoft again here, but many games since, in particular almost every single open world Ubisoft game, has tried to match this amount of things to do, but with the unintended result of making their game worlds bloated and overwhelming. Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed Unity are huge culprits of this. More games should take the approach of fleshing out their side activities and mini-games like Rockstar does. I can think of a few off the top of my head, such as the Yakuza series or again The Witcher 3, with its overwhelmingly popular Gwent card game. Again, not something I'm personally interested in, but I can appreciate the effort that's been put into it. And I feel that Red Dead Redemption really does excel in this regard, and it's something I know will be a huge distraction in the upcoming game. Music is an often underappreciated part of gaming, and that's sad because I feel that many games are enhanced by their use of a musical score. I wouldn't have half as many rose-tinted memories of Morrowind if not for that hauntingly beautiful main theme, one that Bethesda has increasingly butchered with each subsequent entry to the series. Red Dead Redemption 2 has one of the best musical scores of any game I've played, and I realise that's a bold statement, but it's one I'll stand behind all the way. Bill Elm and Woody Jackson really captured the feeling of a western with their music, and I quite happily listen to the soundtrack to this day. One particular song that is even mentioned on the Wikipedia article for the game is the song Far Away by Jose Gonzalez, which plays as John enters Mexico for the first time. From what I gather, this particular piece is thought of very highly, and I can't help but agree. It really captures the fact that Marston himself is indeed far away from home, a truly superb piece of musical direction that enhances the overall experience. I was very pleased to hear that Woody Jackson would be returning to score Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'm sure I'll be picking up a copy of the game's soundtrack when it releases. Sound design and voice acting is something that Rockstar always seems to nail in their games. As much as I despise the character of Trevor in GTA 5, I can't help but appreciate the amazing job Stephen Ogg does bringing that character to life. John Marston is voiced and motion captured by Rob Weithoff, I hope I said that right, and having read about the struggles he had getting roles before he was cast in Red Dead, I can't help but commend him for doing an absolutely fantastic job, and I'm glad to see the amount of praise he garnered across the board. From what I can gather from various articles and of course Wikipedia, Rob himself doesn't actually do an awful lot of acting roles anymore, though he is returning to voice John Marston in Red Dead Redemption 2. The voice acting across the board is superb, notably Landon Ricketts, a retired gunslinger living a quiet life in Mexico, voiced by the late Ross Hagen, and the aforementioned gang leader Dutch van der Linde, who is voiced by Benjamin Byron Davis, who will again return to voice the character in the upcoming game. I feel like not enough credit is given to voice actors in video games, and I commend Rockstar for picking lesser known actors for these roles, and opting not to use big name Hollywood actors, something that they have done with prior GTA games. The overall sound design of the horses, the guns, and the environment must be commended too. As I've touched on before, it all contributes to that immersion that is so well done in this game, and indeed the majority of Rockstar's games. Pretty visuals will always help of course, but sound design can be a huge part of making a world believable. As much as I enjoy the Stalker series, the overall sounds of the guns are so crap that I almost always had to download some sort of fix because it kills the otherwise great immersion of those games. Every gunshot in Red Dead Redemption feels impactful, every NPC felt authentic, and every town felt believable, and that's due in huge part to the superb sound design. Perhaps something that is overlooked frequently is the fantastic multiplayer aspect of Red Dead. It was again a culmination of all that Rockstar had learned from the fun but ultimately appallingly balanced and structured multiplayer of GTA 4, and the decision to allow 16 players to roam freely across the game world was a masterstroke that was again taken further with Grand Theft Auto Online. The ability to form a posse of your friends within the session to clear gang hideouts or attack other posses was fantastic fun, and this coupled with a clear and well balanced progression creation system cemented Red Dead Redemption as one of the most enjoyable multiplayer experiences of that time. Of course, nowadays GTA Online has become a mess of microtransactions and ridiculous looking vehicles and guns. With the announcement of a Red Dead Online just a few weeks ago, slated to release a month or so after Red Dead Redemption 2, I really do hope Rockstar adheres more to their original multiplayer experience. But with Take-Two Interactive's heavy push for microtransactions in their future games, it's hard to have much hope that Red Dead Online will be anything but a carbon copy of the soulless but ultimately profitable GTA Online. Again, for many people, the multiplayer aspect really doesn't matter. I certainly barely touched it in GTA 5, and I must admit that aside from playing with my school friends, I vastly preferred the single player of Red Dead Redemption. I think people can rest easy that as much as their corporate taskmasters will try to meddle with the online aspect of their games, Rockstar will not compromise when it comes to their single player design. Though I wouldn't hold out much hope for any kind of substantial story expansion post-release, I still remember when one was announced for GTA 5, and it seems that the age of having expansion packs on the level of the Shivering Isles or the Lost and the Damned is very much in the past. Rockstar could surprise me though, they're not a developer that follows a conventional path, so I suppose we can be quietly optimistic. I used to pray for a re-release of this game on the PS4 or the PC, but I found myself asking the question, does it really need a remaster? And yes, while the increased graphical fidelity, 60 FPS and a 4K resolution would be nice, I can't help but feel that this game could drop on the PlayStation Store or Steam tomorrow, as it is, and it would still sell copious amounts. I'm perhaps further backed up by the sheer number of people playing the backwards compatible version on the Xbox One, and the uncountable forum posts about the elusive PC version, something that I'm sad to say will never happen. From what I've read, it's a minor miracle that Rockstar got Red Dead working for consoles, and they've never been fantastic when it comes to their PC ports in the past. Red Dead Redemption remains my favourite game of all time. 8 years later, only a handful of games have come close to matching the level of quality, and I'm eagerly anticipating the release of Red Dead Redemption 2 later this month. For now though, I'd encourage everyone to give Red Dead another go, whether it be on the Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS3 or God help you PS Now. This game is a timeless classic, and it remains to me Rockstar Games' finest creation. Hey guys, sorry it's been such a long time between videos. It's been a really busy year or so, and I just haven't had the time to really sit down and make a long video like my old stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm hoping to get something out on Kingdom Come Deliverance and maybe Pillars of Eternity before Christmas. I'm not going to give any kind of ETA though. If you want to know when there's stuff happening, it's best to follow my Twitter page, which you can have a look in the link below for. And also, if you want to watch me play uncut games, you can go on my Twitch channel, where I normally stream every few days, normally with my girlfriend and my friends. It's pretty funny, but don't expect anything as articulate as this channel. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Once again, I'm so sorry that it took so long to make. Please subscribe if you haven't, like the video, share it around, I'd really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot, guys.